Hi, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to talk about the kit that I use for negative scanning. Now, almost a year ago I put out a video that looked at what photographic kit I got for Christmas, and in that was some stuff that basically I got to try and improve my neg scanning, and I said at the time that I'd put together a video talking about what I bought. Little did I know that almost a year later I would end up going down a complete rabbit hole around negative scanning, and it hasn't been quite as simple, shall I say, as I'd first imagined it would be. Well, actually, that's not true. Some parts of it were very straightforward. Other parts of it, yeah, I had a little bit of a journey to get what I wanted and get to the point that I needed. So what I'm going to do is run through with you what I started with, what I got for Christmas last year, and then what I've ended up with, and talk about the pros and cons around them. Now, keep in mind, you can go to stupid amounts of money with negative scanning equipment, and that was never my goal. I'm not a pure film photographer. I do quite a bit of film photography, but most of what I do is digital, so I'm not going to invest hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds on the kit. I'm going to basically use what I think is a good value for money approach. Now, in terms of the camera and lens that I use, that's fairly straightforward. I use my Olympus EM1 Mark II as a camera body, although that's not really the key bit, and I use an Olympus 30mm macro lens. I use the 30mm macro lens. It's a cracking lens, it's really sharp, and it suits what I need to do, and with a 1.25 maximum magnification ratio, it's certainly good enough for scanning negatives. And I don't have any issue with Micro Four Thirds. Nobody's ever complained about the quality of the film work that I've put out there, so I'm perfectly good with that. I use a tripod mount over my desk to actually mount that, and then I use a light source and a negative holder. I predominantly shoot 35mm, but I do shoot a little bit of medium format, and I'm trying to get into shooting more medium format. Depending on the size of the medium format neg, I might go for them in one shot, but most of the time I will take around about 4 shots, maybe 2 shots, depending on the actual makeup of it, and stitch those together to try and max out the increase in image quality from a medium format shot. So, where did I start? Okay, this is where I started, which is the Lomo Digitalizer Plus. This is around about, I think, £80 in the UK, and you get quite a bit in here. It's a not unreasonable starting point. So you get a Hold Me Tight with a film mask, and that is actually a light source, and as you can see, bits pop in and out of here. So you've got a light source. So you've got a light source, and you've got a carrier which attaches to the light source magnetically, and you've got a little wheel on there that you can rotate through to push the neg through. Now I'm just going to grab some old rebate from a strip of film. Okay, here's the rebate. So basically you feed this in here, and okay, so with the rebate you feed the film in one end, and you then turn the wheel, and that pulls eventually. There we go. That pulls the negatives through, and they will then eventually come out the other end. There we go. So as you can see, that pulls the negative through. It will work quite well for 35mm. You can also, if you take the 35mm mask out of there, use it like this, and that will then shoot sprocketed. So if you've got something like a sprocket rocket, that works quite well. And on its own, and the magnets in this are quite chunky, you can also scan 120 in there as well. So out of the box, you've got quite a few formats that you can shoot using this. And it's a nice cost-effective way of doing it. You do have some limits on the 120. I've got a clack, an Agfa clack, which is 6x9. This won't allow you to scan 6x9 in one shot, but you can do it if you scroll backwards and forwards using the little wheel and basically use it in that regard. It does come with quite a handy little spirit level, two-way spirit level, which clips in there. It's constructed almost entirely out of plastic, but it's actually reasonably well put together. And I'll be honest, it actually works quite well. Now, you can buy another version of this which has a kind of copy stand arrangement, but don't be fooled, it's not for digital cameras or DSLRs. It's actually designed for scanning using a mobile phone, which obviously you can do. But if you are scanning by phone, that will do the job quite nicely. So yeah, cost effective, does a reasonable number of formats. My issues with it, there are a couple. One is that the base and the lack of weight around it, because it is quite lightweight, mean that as you're feeding negatives through, it is too easy for this to move around, to move from side to side slightly. So I found I was constantly repositioning it, which slows you down ever so slightly. And secondly, the light source in it is probably the weakest point behind it. It's not massively bright, and that means you're using longer exposure times, which means there's more chance of movement, which can reduce your sharpness if you're not careful with it. I'm also not convinced that the colour correction on it is great, and there's no way to change the actual temperature of the light itself depending on whether you are scanning slides, colour negative or black and white negative. So it does have some limitations, and that's what got me adding items to a Christmas wish list. So I wanted to move up from this, but this is actually a reasonable starting point. I was quite pleasantly surprised by this. Okay, so moving on from the digitalizer, what Santa brought me last year was a CineStill CS Lite and a Pixelator negative holder. So I want to talk about these two separately. So first of all, the CineStill CS lighting source. Now, this is actually a fairly compact piece of kit. What you've got is a, pop it down, USB powered light box. It's got a high CRI rating, which is colour something index. Basically, it's accuracy of colour rendition through it. This scores highly on that. It plugs in via USB, as does the digitalizer. But if I just bring this up, you might be able to see it, might focus. This, as well as having an on-off option, also allows you to change the colour temperature depending on what you're scanning. So it changes the temperature for slide versus colour neg versus black and white neg, and it is also extremely bright. It also comes with a number of pop-in masks depending on the actual scanning option you're using, so it gives you a great deal of flexibility around that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, if I remember correctly, this light source alone costs about as much as the digitalizer setup in its entirety does. So we are taking a jump in terms of cost here, and that does need to be taken into account. But this I was perfectly happy with, still using it to this day. I found it a great piece of kit, and for me it hits a real sweet spot in terms of a light source between colour accuracy, brightness, the ability to change the colour temperature for the type of film stock you're scanning, and price. I just think it works really well, and this I actually wholeheartedly recommend. Which leads us on to this, the Pixelator. Now, on paper, this did absolutely everything I need, and it was a really clever idea, and that's what drew me to it. It's also quite reasonably priced. I think it was around about £50-60. So what you basically get is this. Now, there are a whole host of accessories that can be purchased for this, but basically what you have here is, if I take it apart a second, a translucent backing panel which can be used, which basically is a diffuser for scanning, and then this grid here with these inserts which you basically pop in to, I just pop this back together, which what you effectively do with them is you pop them in, and this then allows you to set up exactly what you're going to scan and set your scanning areas. Now, one of the great things about this is these inserts can be 3D printed, so you can 3D print these, and they have a great advantage that they are very flexible. This will do pretty much out of the box all of your 35mm formats, apart from if you want the sprocket showing. It will do all sizes of 120, and it will even do 5x4 sheet film. So on paper, this has an awful lot going for it. But what I found was, in use, there are a number of niggly little problems with it, and one of them you're actually seeing live here, and that is these pieces don't always fit in that well, and they are quite loose. So a couple of things I found was, as I advance on to the next negative, and I'll talk about how you advance negatives through here in a moment, which is another issue, what I found was I always give them a quick squirt with the blower brush just as I move them on, if there's any dust on there, to try and minimise that. On more than one occasion, using a rocket blower, it actually popped this section out. So it actually blew one of these sections out, which is obviously a big inconvenience. Now, you've then also got how you feed film through here. So just grabbing my rebate, you can't just feed the film through here. What you've got to do is lift up the bottom and push down on the top, and that opens it ever so slightly. You've then got to manually feed your film through, frame it up, and then push it closed. Hope bits don't fall off of it, and then scan it. And when you want to move on to your next frame, you've got to repeat that. You've got to pop this open, push it through, close it back up, take the shot, and it's quite lightweight. So what I found with that was it was moving around a lot again. It was up and down. I was worried that I might be scratching my negatives, because if it's down a bit too far, there's little feet that are supposed to guide it under here, but the negative can then get trapped underneath it, and so on. But that wasn't the issue that I most had with it. What I found was, when I was scanning negatives and when I was working on the end results of them, one of the things I found was I was getting, and this first happened with, I think it was my little Vivitar 35EE, first roll I put through that, and I was at first convinced there was something wrong with the camera, because all of the shots from one side had what appeared to be light leak. But it wasn't the right colour for a light leak from the back of the camera, which is what that would imply, which implied a light leak from the front. And it didn't make sense, basically. And what I eventually narrowed it down to, by scanning the same negative and going back to my digitalizer, and then this, was, and I don't know how this is happening, but light somehow is getting in here and actually exposing more on this side than this side of the negative. And it was just, I couldn't do anything to get rid of it. Now, I know from reading reviews there are plenty of people out there who use these, the Pixelator, and use it extremely well and really like it. But for me, the neatness of the concept and the design, and I really do like the concept behind this, didn't outweigh what for me were some real issues with the practicality and the usability of it. And the scanning issue there was obviously a big issue for me, to such a degree that I've effectively retired this. And while I was researching alternatives, I actually went to a bit of a nailed together Heath Robertson MacGyver solution of using the advanced mechanism from my digitalizer on the CS light to get, you know, decent light and colour temperature correction, but with something that wasn't actually giving me light leaks and contamination, because this was really quite a challenge to use. So what did I end up replacing this with? And that is where this little box comes in. This is the Essential Film Holder. Now, again, a lot of research, a lot of watching reviews, and a little bit of a leap brought me to the Essential Film Holder. Now, it is more expensive than the Pixelator. Nearly forgot what it was called there, than the Pixelator. But it is a neater solution. Now, these are constructed by hand. It's a guy in the UK that puts them together, and basically what you've got is a really, really, really well-made system here. You've got two sandwiches just here, and you've got a diffusion plate at the bottom. Now, one thing you will notice is there is significant space between where you rest it on your light source and the diffusion plate, and then more space between the diffusion plate and your two negative carriers just here. And that is effectively to make sure that the light is as diffused as possible before it hits your negative and you start scanning it. Now, you can buy these in two ways. You can buy them ready assembled, or you can buy a cheaper kit form where you assemble it yourself. I went for the kit form. It takes about 10 minutes to assemble. It's very, very straightforward. And what you've effectively got on here is two systems. This will do 35mm, not with sprocket holes or panoramas, unless you want to, again, multiple exposure and stitch the panoramas, and it will do all sizes of 120. Now, how it does this in this unit is, as standard, when you construct it, it's set up for 35mm. Now, if I grab my rebate again, feeding 35mm into here is very simple. It simply goes in this side and you just push it through. Now, this is very curly 35mm here because it's been out and about for a while, so you do need to give it a bit of a tweak, but normally I don't have any issues with this, and it slides through beautifully. This material is very soft touch. It's got no issues with machining on it or creation, however they make it, I don't know. And the tolerances are perfect, I've found, for holding 35mm negs. It works really well. Now, downside is you don't have any fancy mechanism for moving it through, so you are doing it completely manually, so it is cotton gloves time and be careful. But there's nothing to blow out when I hit it with the rocket blower, and I found that there's enough heft to the unit itself that it really doesn't move around that much when I'm feeding negatives through. I've had a few issues, but far less than with the other two solutions. Now, if you want to scan 120, and this is where a bit of the faff comes in again, you do need to effectively unscrew this top layer. Now, I'm not going to do it because it will take absolutely ages, but you use the wing nuts, take all four of them off, lift this middle section off, tighten the wing nuts back up, and below that you've got a 120 carrier that works in exactly the same way, but for 120 film, and that will do 645, 6.6, 6x9 quite comfortably. So I'm 6.7 as well. I've not had any issues with that. I've had no problems with light contamination off the back of this. It's a simple but elegant design. It's not as cheap as the other two solutions, but this is, alongside the CS Lite, what I've ended up using for my scanning purposes. Now, those two combined, because this I think was around about £60-70 if I remember correctly, and you're looking similar-ish price for the CS Lite, so you're looking around about £140 for the pair of them, roughly, and that to me is a good price point for quality, ease of use, decent results, and price for scanning my negatives and positives for that matter. And it just works really well. That said, I will still occasionally go back to the digitalizer. If I've got something that's come off of my Sprocket Rocket, I just whack it in there, because the Sprocket Rocket is a fairly low-tech solution. I whack the digitalizer on my CS Lite and scan them doing that. But anything else gets scanned with this, and personally, this with the CS Lite gets a thumbs up from me. It's stable, it's well put together, you get great customer service. Because they are produced to order, you can have a bit of a wait when you order one to get one of these, but the supplier does keep you well informed of lead times and how long you're waiting and where you are in the queue and all of that kind of thing. But overall, yeah, I'm a big fan of the Essential Film Holder. For my scanning needs, it works really, really well, and combined with the CS Lite, I find it, as I say, a great combination. So that is my journey to my current point in negative and positive scanning in the film world. So if you found this video useful, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when new content gets uploaded. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Take care. Bye.